All right, gang, and welcome to Procreate. So this is going to be the beginning of our lesson on building an actual Flatscape. So where some of these lessons are technical in nature, this is actually going to be a project in which we're going to apply everything we've learned thus far. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that you do in a professional workflow is you got to set up your layer structure. So let's go ahead and set up a layer. Now, the layer one, let's go ahead and create a new palette. Now, you know how to do this. We go to palettes, we go ahead and we're going to make that a default. We rename the palette, let's call it Flatscape. Now, I'm not telling you I'm going to be completely perfect during this entire process. God knows I do a tremendous amount of rework sometimes. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a background for my night scene. Now I'm going to go ahead and choose something that's quasi in the center of stuff, and I'm going to put that color in my palette. All right, so let's go ahead and drag that down onto here. Now let's go ahead and create a new layer, but before we do that, let's rename this Sky Background. Okay, perfect. Good layering structure makes for good projects. Now let's call this Foreground. And there we go. Now, I'm going to go ahead and cheat on this a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use a primitive brush. Now, you have a shape brushes. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use a square brush. And I'm going to make sure I've got a greenish type of background here for this. And I'm going to put that down in my palette. And I'm going to stamp this bad boy. All right, now. Shrink that down a little bit further. Perfect. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to transform it so that it consumes my canvas. Now you see how it's allowing me to go over the shapes of the canvas? I'm going to turn the magnetics on. All right. So I think we're pretty good right about there. And then I'm going to flood fill this bad boy. Perfect. All right. Now that being said, let's go ahead and create some mountains. So we need a layer. Let's call this rename mountain. All right, perfect. You see how we're bringing in the concept of primitives and we're doing everything that we're talking about there in all the different lessons. Now mountain, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start somewhere over in here, let's say. And I'm going to create that in my palette. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over and I'm going to grab my triangle primitive. And I'm going to crank this bad boy up to a good size. And I'm going to put that down. Now that's a little bit too big. All right. Now we're going to go ahead and bring this up a little bit further. Now, where do we want this to be? We want this to be behind that. All right. Perfect. So we're in pretty good shape there with the mountain. All right. Now we want to flood fill it. And now I want to go ahead and let's alpha lock it. Go ahead, we're going to alpha lock. Now, what does that mean? That means, again, it's transparent. And now I'm going to come up and I'm going to put some snow caps on here. Now, I'm saving the bright white for later. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to snow cap it like this. And I'm going to go into my airbrush. And I'm going to grab my hard brush. And I'm going to shrink that bad boy down. And I'm going to go ahead and just put some snow caps on it. All right, just like that, folks. It doesn't get much harder than that. Okay, so now let's go ahead and let's build a tree, right? So in order to build a tree, let's grab 3 layers. And now on each one of these layers, let's go ahead and make a triangle. So we're going to go ahead. I'm going to grab my shape brushes. I'm going to grab a triangle, but now I'm going to go to my green, but I want it to be very, very dark, right? Probably right about there. So we're going to go ahead and just drop that into the palette any old where we want. And now I'm going to grab my brush and I'm going to crank it up and put a triangle in there. And I'm going to drop that bad boy down. All right. Now, it's by intention that I put it on 3 different layers. 2, and the last one in the last layer, is going to be 3. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to come over and arrange these. So that's first. Then there's this middle layer. So let's go ahead and drop that middle layer down there. All right, and I think we're going to put that right about there. And then we want to come into this middle. Oh, I'm sorry, the top. And we're going to crank that bad boy down into there, and we're going to make that a little bit wider than even that. Perfect. So in reality, folks, I had those kind of messed up there. There's the bottom layer. And we're going to shrink this guy down a little bit. And we're going to position him right where he needs to be. All right, now we go through and we flood fill them all. So go over here, flood fill, come over here, flood fill. All right, now what we want to do, we want to combine all these. So we're going to pinch them. All right, and then we want to move them up above the foreground, just like that. And now every tree needs a trunk, so let's grab the square brush. Let's drop that down a little bit here. We're going to go through and we're going to choose kind of a brownish to start. All right, and we're going to make sure our square brush is selected, and we're going to create a new layer, and we're going to pop that bad boy in there. And now what are we going to do? We're going to go ahead and we're going to adjust the primitive. You've seen this show before. And then we go into here, and let's click and drag. And we'll combine them up. And now we rename. Let's call this tree. All right, so a lot of the steps here, folks, is about getting your base level images onto the canvas. So let's go ahead and stop this lesson here, and then we'll go into the second lesson and I'll show you how to do the duplication. We'll add the moon and we'll get the river into the scene. All right, we'll see you in the next one.